We're ready. We're happening. We're live. So, hey everybody. Hi, how's it going? It's Haas Milone again here with the Brutocao Bliss Vineyards again for our second virtual tasting. We got a packed house almost. We're social distancing. We're all here. Of course, we got our producer, tech wizard extraordinaire, Kevin Brutocao. Say hi, Kevin.
Hey everyone.
Kevin's over there. Taking a look at all your questions and making sure that they're worthy of putting over the internet, that there's no really bad, words or sayings or anything derogatory about me. Is David Brutocao is also here tonight. David, say hi.
Hello.
All right, we got that. And we have our medical personnel here with Karen Brutocao, making sure that, I don't stroke out from drinking too much wine. Anyway, so we're all doing good. Everybody's healthy, having fun. So I guess it's time to get the TIP and the SIP for the WT because we're out of TP. I have no idea, but that's how we're rolling tonight, okay? Also out there in another world of the internet is Stephen Brutocao. Steve is actually on the chat room. So if you guys are asking questions, you might pop it in there and here and answer some questions for you. So as we go along, by the time this is all over, we're going to have this down. This is going to be the greatest thing you ever saw. It's a work in progress. Again, just to remind everybody, we still have 1 cent shipping going on any order 6 bottles or more. Along with that, keep an eye out, and you're going to start seeing something about a really big sale happening with the Brutocao wine starting next week. Check your emails, look for stuff on the social media pages for more details. And let me tell you, there are going to be some really great deals. So we're trying to keep everybody happy, keep the wine flowing at that point in time. So we have 2 great wines tonight we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about some winemaking styles with those wines a little bit more. But before we get into that, we're also going to talk about, make sure when you open your wine. So for our Chardonnay especially, you always want that just lightly chilled. Don't chill it to the bone. If you put it in the fridge, you always want to pull it out about a half hour to 45 minutes before you plan on drinking it. It tastes so much better because it's barrel fermented Chardonnay. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. For all of our red wines, I always suggest about an hour to 2 hours ahead of time, just pop the cork and just let it to breathe. And that really releases a lot more of the flavors and the aromas. So you'll get a bigger sensation of what's actually in the wines. All right. Foods to pair with, I know this is something that a lot of people have kind of asked about. So I'm going to give you some general guidelines here. When it comes to pairing foods for wine, for doing tastings, I look at the flavors that usually I find in the wines. So think about for red wines, plums, blackberries, strawberries, figs, raspberries, blueberries, those types of fruits. So if you kind of have those, on the side, especially with the Quadriga, you're going to find quite a few of those flavors. And we're usually at plums, I'm talking about a dark, really red plum type of that. For wines like Chardonnay, I'm looking more like apples, mango, pears, kind of a pineapple, kiwi also, and that works with Sauvignon Blanc as well. And think about also dried fruits, like dried apricots, dried cranberries, or dried pears or apples or mangoes too. Because sometimes when you get fresh fruit, if it's really sweet, so like for the apple, I like Granny Smith's when I'm tasting with wine. I don't want something like a Fuji or a Gala that's really sweet. I want something that's a little more tart, because otherwise the sweetness is really going to make the wine taste funny. So just remember that. All right. The other thing that's kind of fun to do with wine when you're tasting wines is a spice jam. Now, like last week with the Zinfandel, that's where spice jam is really great. Because what happens is you get all that fruit berryness of the whatever it is, a raspberry, strawberry, or whatever that preserve is. But then when they add, sometimes it's jalapeno, sometimes it's chipotle pepper, goes into those spice jams that you'll find on charcuterie platters. It enhances the spiciness of the wine at the same time and gives you a different flavor profile. So that's always kind of a fun thing to throw in there. And sun-dried tomatoes. They're very potent, very powerful, but a little bit on a cracker with some cream cheese or whatever, or some brie, will bring another layer of freshness, well, not freshness, but another layer of savory flavor that might bring something else out in the wine. As far as cheeses go, I really like goat cheese personally. I like goat cheese more with my wines because you can get them herbed. You can get them with fruit in them, or you can just get them like peppered. There's a local cheese manufacturer, Penny Royal Farms over in Anderson Valley, and they do a goat cheese with blueberries in it, which tonight would be awesome with the Quadriga. So that's what I kind of really love. Parmesan cheese, which is kind of salty. Some type of a smoked cheese, like a smoked Gouda, smoked cheddar is always good. Something creamy like a brie, like that, and then something strong. I like blue cheese as being a strong cheese for me because it really doesn't pair well with a lot of wines. I'm just going to tell you, but what it does is it makes you taste something different in the wine because of that. That's why it's a little bit fun. And then if you got that with some figs, you can't go wrong either. So then that gives you a whole other tasting profile. The other things probably is chocolate, especially dark chocolate, not milk chocolate. Dark chocolate will give you some really great flavors to go with wines, especially like cabs and the bigger reds. Espresso beans, because you're going to hear us talk about espresso beans and some of these other ones too. So
we're having a little audio issue here we're trying to resolve.
Oh, so I just heard that we're having audio issues. So we're trying to get that fixed. I don't know if we're going to rewind this or not, but
it's back.
So we have audio. We're back. Okay. So vanilla, caramel, those are also flavors you'll hear me talk about. There is a difference in vanillas. We're talking not just the vanilla that you have in your vanilla extract, but you have also vanilla bean. Vanilla bean's a totally different aroma and flavor profile. So you'll hear me talk about that too, along with caramels, creme brulee, that caramelized flavors. The chocolate espresso bean, the vanillas, and the caramels, those are usually barrels. That's coming from oak most of the time. Spiciness, a little bit from the grape, different spice, like cloves and that type of spice, that's usually a barrel coming from that. So the next thing I'm going to tell you is that just raid your fridge. Really look at what's in your refrigerator. Look for something that's salty. Look for something that's acidic. Look for something that's got some fat in it. And those are the three characteristics that you kind of look for to taste with the wine, and it's going to show you what the wine is. So capers for a salty fact, it works great. So you can use that on crackers with just cream cheese. That saltiness, the capers is going to change the wine's profile. Acidity, lemons are awesome. Just a squeeze, and when you put a little bit of lemon juice on something like just shrimp, it changes the flavor. So acidity usually brightens up and actually enhances fruit flavor or in the wine. And it does the same for your foods. It brightens them up and gives you a different flavor profile. So that's kind of something you can play with and just play around. So it doesn't have to be super fancy. It can be very simple. So just a couple cheeses, a couple pieces of dried fruit, some almonds. Almonds do really well also. All right. So that's where we're at tonight. That's what we're going to be talking about. And that's your food pairing. So go out and buy all that right now. We'll wait for you, right? Okay. So right now what's happening out in the vineyard. The vineyard's still doing the same thing. We're just dealing with hopefully the last of the frost. We'll see. We already had we had another incident a couple days ago, but we're doing all right. Again, we're out there moving some wires around, finishing up some tying, fixing up some different things, doing some tractor work, getting that done. In the winery, we just started bottling the Bliss Chardonnay yesterday. So right now we're in the middle of bottling the 19 Bliss Chardonnay, and we'll be moving into June, which will be the next big bottle. We're blending up right now. I've been blending up some of the components for the Quadriga. I was working on the Primitivo today and the Sangiovese. So I'll be finalizing those two blends tomorrow and putting those back to barrel, getting that ready. And then I'll be working on the Dolcetto and the Barbera also for this. So that's kind of what my week's been like here. One of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to take some more videos around the winery and the vineyard, post them before we start, so you guys will be able to see some more action shots of what we're actually kind of doing this time of year. One other thing I want to just bring up tonight, again, ask questions anytime you want. I got a couple people here that'll feed them to me, or people online will answer. But the other thing we're going to do is once we're done about 5:25, 5:30, and we're done with this, we're going to call it happy hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to hang out for another 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, as long as people still have questions to ask, answer all the questions that didn't get answered, and continue on, just kind of being really casual about it and just answering questions until everybody's satisfied or done listening to me talk. How's that? All right. Okay. So with that being done, let's get started and let's look at our first wine. The first wine is our 2018 Brutocao Chardonnay. So this Chardonnay comes from 100% from the Bliss Ranch. The main block for this Chardonnay is right below the winery itself. It's called Block 13. But there are other little blocks and little sections that we bring in that add components. But even in Block 13, there's actually 3 separate components in that block that we picked separately on purpose. So the reason why we do that is because each block gives us, or each section of that block gives us a different flavor profile. We also did a really nice yeast experiment in 2018 that helped us kind of find out what yeasts deliver the best aromas and flavor profiles for these blocks. So let's talk about Block 13. Block 13 is kind of a little rolling block. At one end of it, it's got some a little bit different clone than the rest. Excuse me. And so what we do with that is that section usually comes in a little bit earlier. It's not as heavy. It's not as a heavy producer as the rest of the block. So we'll bring that early, and what we'll do is called whole cluster pressing. So we pick it and we hand pick that into white macro bins, and then we bring it and we dump it directly into the press, and we press it off instead of running it through a destemmer. The reason why is we want to hold those aromatics that those grapes have. We want to make sure that we don't lose that, because that section is a little bit different. We do the same thing with our Dijon clones, which is from another block, which is Block 29 and Block 27. So those are, if you guys have ever been out here, that Chardonnay is when you're driving out to our Contento Ranch to the wedding site, that's where that's at. So it's kind of a really gravelly soil. And they're very aromatic, a lot of floral aromas. So when you get this Chardonnay, usually, and you bring it up, that little in the back end of the nose, you'll get kind of a jasmine. You'll get a little bit of a floral note in the back. That's that clone. That's that clone coming through with that little bit of floralness. And it's the grapes themselves don't have, it's not really jasmine when you taste them or smell them, but when you bring them in with the rest of this blend, it blossoms that way. And it becomes that floral, very perfumey back end of the nose. So that's what happens there. Though the rest of it we pick at night with the machine. So we do a lot of machine harvesting. We've talked about this before. They come in whole berries, beautiful, but we pick them at night because they're nice and cold, about probably anywhere from 45 to 55 degrees, believe it or not. So that's what it does for that, is it really holds the integrity of the grape. So all those mangoes and tropical flavors I'm getting out in the vineyard come in, and they make it all the way to the winery. We do not crush any grapes here at Brutocao or for the Bliss. It all goes either to a press or it goes through a destemmer. And by doing that, we save the integrity, I think, of the grapes a lot more. They don't get as beat up. We'll talk a little bit about that, how the pumps and pump over to stuff when we get to the Quadriga. So for the white wines, they come into the receiving hopper, go through the destemmer, and then are pumped directly to the press. Unless they're whole cluster pressed, then we dump directly to the press. Confused? Good. I've done my job. Have another drink. You'll be fine. Okay. So once we get it into the press, we press it off and we take press fractions. Right? Okay. Yeah, everybody, winemaking's easy. So what we do is we take what's called the free run. So that's the least amount of pressure used. And by taking that free run juice off, it's the cleanest and most aromatic, and it doesn't have a lot of, like there's some tannins and what's called phenolics in it, which you can start getting like this tea, almost tea bag aroma. So we don't want that. So we keep that separate. That goes to one tank. And then the rest of this Chardonnay juice goes to another tank, which we call the press juice. They're kept separate. So then that juice then is racked off after a day. And then we inoculate that with one of the yeasts that we're using, depending upon what program. And then once it's inoculated into a tank, we barrel it down into French oak barrels. So barrels are very important to me. I'm a barrel guy. I'm a trained cooper. I love working with wood. I love working with barrels. And barrels give you a lot of aromas, but they also give you a lot of mouthfeel. And because they're so thick, they're insulated basically, you get a little bit warmer fermentation, but it's controlled. And so that adds to the aromatics again and adds to where we're really showing the terroir of the vineyard at the same time. So all we're doing with the yeast is we're enhancing some of those flavors and those different profiles. So we fill the barrels, we let them, they go through that. It's about 25, let's see, I think we're 30% new on the oak for the 2018 Chardonnay. It's 100% French oak, 100% barrel fermented. 30% of those barrels are brand new barrels. So we do that because if you use 100% oak, brand new oak, it would be so overpowering. And you can smell the oak already in this wine and taste it in there, but it's a nuance and it enhances, it's not overpowering. So by doing this with the Chardonnay, bring in a barrel, and then we do what's called surly stirring. So we just mix the lees up. So it's just like cooking. All the great flavors are in the bottom of the pan. Clear juice doesn't have flavor. It's in the bottom, and we want to bring that up. So what we do is we stir what's called the lees, which is basically all the yeast cells that have given up their life for you to have alcohol in your wine. And we just stir it up and get that back up into there. And what happens is by doing that, we cleave open all these yeast cells and they release fatty acids. And these fatty acids actually create mouthfeel and structure in the wine. Meanwhile, the oak is just giving you that nice textural feel also, plus those caramelized flavors coming from the oak. And we're going to talk about oak more and more as we progress through these tastings. But tonight we're just going to kind of glance about the oak, because as Steve Brutocao will tell you, I can talk all night when it comes to oak. As we move into that, by doing that for about 9 months, and then we'll rack it off and we'll make the blends and then we'll bottle it up in June. So it spends about 9 months in the barrel on its lees. It's original lees. We don't rack it off, it's original lees in the barrel. And then and bring that aromas to you and that great flavor in that wine. So then if you take this wine, and again, this wine you don't want cold. We don't want this cold. We want this slightly chilled, because what happens, I think, with Chardonnay is that if you get it too cold, you lose a lot in it. You lose a lot of those tropicals. So throw it in the fridge, chill it down, pull it out, and then open it about a half hour to 45 minutes after that. So the first thing I'm really getting tonight, I'm getting beautiful kind of some white flowers, and then right behind that is that vanilla creme brulee. That's the oak coming through. So you kind of get yeah, it's almost like caramelized butterscotch kind of a thing. But it's that really kind of that vanilla, a lot more vanilla coming out. And then with that, you're getting, so there's that mango and a little bit of a maybe white peach or pear. It's hard to say also in there. And then you get that little bit of a kind of a jasmine, that hint of white flower again in the back end at the end of it. Okay, so a lot of those aromas are from the grape, and except for that caramel butterscotch, that creme brulee, that's the barrel. That's the barrel showing you its presence in there.
Haas, we have a question about the surly stirring.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you actually go about doing that?
Very small people. What we do is, we have a device. We go through the bunghole of the barrel that goes through, and what it does is it actually has a loose fitted paddle on the bottom of it. It's oblong. So it's an oblong paddle. It kind of looks like this, and it's hinged in the middle. So when you stir it, it acts like a prop and it flops back and forth, but you can get it through the bunghole. So we actually physically stir the lees up with this thing. So it's on a handle, and you just kind of rock it back and forth, and it scrapes the bottom of the barrel like this and brings that lees up. So it only takes like about 8 scrapes. And then all of a sudden it comes back up into it and brings all that back up into the wine.
And how many barrels are you doing this to at a time?
300. So we do 1 barrel at a time, and we're right around 300 barrels is what we do that to, every 2 weeks. So that's the surly stirring program. Copyright. Okay, so let's get into some flavors. So right up front, oak's kind of coming through that toastiness. toasted almond, kind of vanilla, and then I get a kind of a nice creaminess, great mouthfeel. That's where you start to pick up that mango again. A little bit of citrus, not much though. And then you get that. See, now in the back half, you really get that butterscotch. And you get that kind of that pear, the pear kind of comes in. And you can see all these flavors kind of, they layer and layer on top of each other. And you get that long, nice finish. This wine goes on 100% malolactic fermentation. Malolactic fermentation is we got to basically the malolactic acid. We have a bacterium that goes after that and ferments it, and it turns it into a lactic acid, basically. Most people think that malolactic fermentation, they look for butter. They look for that big heaviness. Our mallow, actually, that's that citrus note I'm talking about in the mouth. Our malolactic bacteria actually produces citrus notes. So that's kind of where you're getting that more of that, maybe, I don't know if it's kind of like a guava, pineapple kind of citrusy thing going on there. It reminds me a lot of starfruit when I was in Australia in South Pacific, that flavor profile. I really kind of feel like that. Almost a little kiwi maybe, but not quite. But yeah, you can get a lot of different things. This is where, if you have an assortment of food in front of you, or you just have a couple things, just take a bite of a cracker and then taste this. If you're looking for those vanillins and stuff, eat an almond and then taste that. And then stack your flavors. Take a piece of cheese and put a piece of fruit on top of that, you know, and maybe a touch of lemon juice, and then try that with this wine. And that's how you develop a flavor profile. That's how you see how the wine changes. And it'll accentuate different things. Now tonight, my favorite pairing with both these wines is grilled king salmon. And I know that Kevin sent you guys out an email earlier today talking about that. And there's reasons why. I think that, you know, I love Sauvignon Blanc with salmon. I love everything. You know, I love Sauvignon Blanc with everything, and Chardonnay too. But the Chardonnay can take the smokiness of the grill a lot more than the Sauvignon Blancs, I think. And it really works with salmon and the fats, the salmon, and the toastiness of the Chardonnay. Where I think the Quadriga also shows great value when it comes to salmon. It enhances it a different way. And I usually cook my salmon very simply. It's usually just a little salt and pepper. I don't try to get extravagant. I don't use a lot of dill, because I think once you start putting dill on things, it really changes what that food will go with. Then you're kind of narrowed down. And I like things to be able to show what they really are. Especially living here in Mendocino County and getting you know, king salmon right from the coast, which is nice and fresh. And so you get those great flavors going through that. All right. Anybody else got any questions about the Chardonnay? Maybe we have the screw cap.
How many bottles of wine does one barrel yield?
25 cases. So 25 times 12 is what it is. So basically 1 ton of grapes usually is about 3 barrels of wine. Each barrel is roughly 25 cases.
300 bottles.
300 bottles. I got mathematicians all around me with their iPhones calculating it for you. Now, just because we have 300 barrels of Chardonnay doesn't mean that every barrel of that Chardonnay makes it to the Brutocao program. We go through and taste early. We'll actually take some of those out and then we'll go to the Bliss program, just because if it doesn't make it. I talked a little bit about our yeast experiment we did. So we tried 3 different yeasts in the barrel fermentation. We narrowed it down to where we kept one of them. 2 of them, we had our yeast that we've always used, plus the new yeast this year that we brought in. We had a 3rd yeast that we did that it was okay, but it kind of lacked in the finish side of it, and it didn't give as much aromatics as this new yeast that we found. It gave us a lot more aromatics. Our good old D47 that we've always used for barrel fermentation is the big mouthfeel, and it's always been great with that. So now we've added an extra layer and element to that, besides the whole cluster pressing and besides the clone differences.
Haas, so we got some questions about screw cap versus cork, and in the Chardonnay's instance, so why did we go screw cap on the Brutocao Chardonnay?
So screw caps have come a long ways over the years. We could just as easy keep that under a cork, but I feel that our wines work just as well under a screw cap as they do with a cork. I think number one, I'll give you a prime example. My mom, who's 91 years old, loves her Chardonnay, can't open a cork, but she can open a screw cap. So that's kind of one of the things is that it's a little bit easier. It helps us in distribution for restaurants, especially and weddings and that type of catering business. And it doesn't hurt the wine. The wine lasts just as long. I mean, screw cap technology with the liners that are in these, this wine with a cork in it would last just as long as this wine with a screw cap. And we're talking 5-10 years easily and still being a really drinkable, good Chardonnay. So that's the reason why we did that. And it's a cost savings for us. I'll tell you right off the bat. It's a little bit less expensive. And trying to find good corks is really hard. The Brutocao Reds are still going to be in cork. The Reserve Chardonnay will still be in cork just because it's a package, you know, with being a reserve. But otherwise, that's kind of the reason why we did it. And all the Bliss line is 100% under screw cap now, including the reds. So we make the wines so they are drinkable, even a red wine in the screw cap. Okay. All right. So it looks like we need to go into some Quadriga. So here we go.
Last bit on the Chardonnay. So 2 questions. Are we ever planning on doing a big buttery Chardonnay style or an unoaked Chardonnay?
This is about as big and buttery as we'll ever get is this wine right here. Maybe the 17, which is a little oakier than this one. But that's about it. That's as far as we're going to go. I'll be honest with you, it's not the style I like to drink. That's why it's not the style I'm going to make. Now, the reserves are bigger and a little more buttery because they have a lot more oak in them. They're not buttery, but they're just a bigger, oakier style of Chardonnay. And that's because they go back into barrel. So once this all gets pulled out, we actually put the reserve back into the new barrels that this came out of. So it gets a little bit more oak. For an unoaked Chardonnay, technically it would be our Bliss Chardonnay, would be our unoaked Chardonnay to some extent. We still use a little bit of oak in it, but it's untoasted oak. So when you toast oak, that's where the flavor comes from. You can just take a blank oak board, a barrel stave, and put it in wine. You'll not get these flavors I'm talking about. But what you get is things like gallic acid, which comes out of the oak. And that's what helps with structure and mouthfeel. And it uplifts the fruit that's in there. So we actually use untoasted or lightly toasted oak staves in our Bliss tanks to kind of help with giving it a little bit more mouthfeel, along with stirring the leaves up in those tanks also. So yeah, we're never going to make 100% unoaked, but you're going to, you know, our Bliss is pretty much an unoaked Chardonnay, technically. But like I said, this will be as buttery as we're going to get.
And 90 points Best Buy.
Yeah, 90-point Best Buy. That's right, for that Bliss. So it comes along. If you notice, I don't rinse my glasses with water. I rinse them with wine on purpose. So if you're ever at a wine tasting or out thing, just rinse it with the next wine you're going to drink and then dump it out. There's always going to be water residue, and it's going to make the wine taste different. Okay, so just remember that. All right, Quadriga. So we're running a little long on time.
We're at 5. It's 5:58. Real quick, Ann and Steve would like to know a little more about the glasses and using different types of glasses. And as we discussed before, we're going to bring that up maybe on the next tasting.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something we're going to talk about next week. I'm going to actually have some examples of the different glasses out here. We'll talk about, you know, Kevin, Karen, and I actually sat down and tasted a bunch of different glasses with Candelabra to see which one accentuated it better. And it was kind of a learning experience for those guys a little bit, never experienced it before, but it's a great thing. But yeah, we'll talk about that. I'll have some different examples out here. But yeah, that's next week. So please stand by. All right. All right, so we're running long tonight, but that's nothing new for me. All right, so next is Quadriga. Everybody knows what a Quadriga is, right? 4 horses abreast pulling a chariot. Like in Ben-Hur or on the top of the Arc de Triomphe is the Quadriga. So 4. So this is our 2016 Quadriga. We're the Brutocaos and the Milones are very proud of their Italian heritage, and this is a great wine to make and to showcase great, Italian wines. In Italy, I'd be shot for making this wine because it's not regional. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun. You actually get all four corners of Italy pretty much in this wine. So what we do is we actually make each varietal separately as a Brutocao wine and then put the blend together. So in this wine is Primitivo, Sangiovese, Barbera, and Dolcetta. We also, for the first time ever, added a little Merlot and a little Syrah. And I'll talk to that a little bit later on, but you'll see that in the tasting notes online. So basically what this wine is this is a wine that pretty much is going to go with everything you put on your plate in front of you when you're doing a wine tasting. The reason why is that it's going to bring a different flavor every time you taste something and sip this wine. Another varietal is going to pop different. So traditionally what you have in this wine is you're going to have that, so there it is, that nice little, there's some sweet violets in there, and that's the Dolcetta. That's the little cutie coming in. It's just it's a light hint. And then you're going to see a little bit of, there's some like red berry fruit. That's kind of coming from probably the Primitivo and the Sangiovese both, between strawberries, raspberries, and some other lighter berries. And then you get just that little hint of spice in the back end of the nose. It's kind of like not quite clove, more cinnamon stick, I would say. And it kind of reminds me of like when you pop a jar of cinnamon sticks and you just open that jar up. Because remember, we're talking different, not cinnamon, but cinnamon sticks. There's always a different aroma for these different things. So that's what it reminds me. It's in the back end, kind of a baking spice. When you taste this, it's very round and lush. And you get that, there's that wonderful blueberry note from that Barbera. And that Barbera is just, I love our Barbera because of that red, dark red soil. We'll have to go take some pictures. We'll show it to you later on of that soil and where this Barbera comes from. And it just gives this beautiful blueberry note in there. And you get that nice, thick, fat silkiness of this wine. That's actually why the Merlot's in it. The Merlot's in there to help give it that little bit more mouthfeel. That's the reason why we put that in there. Italian varietals tend to be a little bit thin. 2016 was a really hot year. We were done, for all purposes, we were done harvesting, I believe, I looked up today, by October 15th. So it was one of those, it was the last of the drought years, if I remember correctly. We finished picking really early. So the wines were a little bit thinner. They didn't sit out there. They didn't have that cooler style summer. So they lost a lot of acid. So it was the other problem. So we had to work with different things. That's why we had to use a little Syrah to beef them up a little bit, and that Merlot to help that mouthfeel. But you're still getting that zen-like finish that's coming from that Primitivo. And you're getting that beautiful, see, I love that lushness. I love that hint of caramelization from the barrel coming through. It's about 25% new oak. You can taste that wonderful American oak kind of in there, and merging with the French oak. And then you're getting the Barbera's got that little bit of acid coming through, but you get that richness in that blend. And you can see there's so many things going on right now in your mouth that by eating something different and then taste this wine, all of a sudden it's going to change. It's a chameleon. It wants to wrap itself around. That's why Italian wines are made to go with food. It's usually the acid and all the flavor components that go into them. They bring so much to the table that they enhance the meal you're with. And that's what this wine's made to do the same thing. When we bring reds in, they go straight to the stemmer into a tank. So once they go into a tank, then we'll actually pump them over for about 3 days. 4 to 6 times a day, usually we try to get in to pump them over. The reason why is we're trying to extract tannins and flavors out of the skins and not the seeds. Tannins are tannins. It doesn't matter if they come from skins or seeds. at this point, but they're more supple and water-soluble tannins come out of skins. Those harsher tannins, those are the ones that usually really pucker you up when you drink a wine and kind of dry you out. Those are seed tannins. So a wine doesn't age because it has a lot of tannin. A wine ages because it's got balance. You need acid as well as tannins in a balanced wine for it to age properly. So that's why with this wine, you kind of get the best of both worlds on that. That's why the Syrah we put that little bit of Syrah in there, kind of beefed it up, gave it a little bit of earthiness, kind of like something from the Siena area, you get that little bit more of a earthy flavor profile, but it also gave it a little bit more tannin structure to help hold this wine together for a longer period of time. Again, here's a wine that's going to last 10, 20 years easily. It's going to taste great. The fruit's going to start diminishing after about probably 12, 15 years, but that's not unusual for a red wine. But it's going to diminish a little bit. Not a lot, but it just starts rolling off. And that's an older wine, and you have to remember that when you drink older reds. It's not going to be the same as when you drink it when you first open it, when you bought it 10 years ago. But it's going to change and be more complex. The thing about those tannins is that they're soft. We use different yeast for each varietal. Actually, behind me, you can see a picture of the Block 12 Primitivo. That's where the Quadriga comes from, up on our Contento Ranch. And behind that is the world famous Block 6, where all our cab comes from, which we'll talk about at another time. But anyway, with the Quadriga, when we're doing all this and we're putting these wines together, I'm tasting the grapes out in the vineyard in a manner to make an individual wine. I'm not thinking about making the Quadriga. I'm thinking about making a Primitivo. I'm thinking about making a Dolcetto. I'm thinking about making a Barbera. All right. And I'm thinking about definitely making Sangiovese, because that's what Len Brutico, David Brutico, myself will drink the most of out of any wine. So that's our favorite. But the reason why I do it that way is because then you make the best wine. And the best wine blended with other wines is going to make a better wine. So you see, if we make sure we're making the best at that time, then by blending in, and then we can add the barrels. Before, we never did that. And we weren't getting that oak component, and the wines weren't as strong as when we started doing that back in 2014. And you see the change between the 2009, 10, 11, and 12. You start to see it 13, but 14 was the banner year. That's the year the Quadriga really changed and became a bigger, bolder wine. It's because of the new oak. We were saving all the oak for the actual varietals, and we're missing out on this one. So now you're getting it there, and you can see that this wine's got a lot of richness. It wants food. It's great. Basically, you can have this with fish, and you can see tasting this wine, like right now, smelling this wine and thinking about, thinking about a fresh piece of salmon on your barbecue, grilling right now, even with a couple of lemon slices and some pepper and some nice sea salt on top of it. Think about that aroma coming off that barbecue and smell this wine. And you can see why it'll go with it. Because just me talking about that lemon, in your head, you get citrus in this nose. You see what I'm saying? You get that kind of that the lemon is all in your mind, but it's perception too. But I can see that going together. And then when you taste it, think of that caramelized top of that salmon, and that fattiness, all those amino acids, all those good things that are in that king salmon we're supposed to be eating to make us healthy, heart strong, right? You see that, but then you can taste in this wine, all of a sudden it gets brighter, a little more acidic, because now you're thinking about that. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it pairs really well. I think this wine's a great chameleon, and it moves around a lot of different dishes. Rosemary, lemon, chicken. Of course, any pasta dish you can come up with, any pizzas you put out there, it's going to go really great. The thing that kills this wine is pepper. Really, lots of pepper, like peppercorns or coffee rub steak, that type of stuff. Those are really big, bold flavors that only going to go with the Cab or Syrah anyway, right? We're talking larger red wines like Petit Syrah, that type of thing. They have a lot more stamina, and they can cut through that. So, but this wine, basically, if you're going to somebody else's house someday, soon, hopefully, for dinner, and you don't know what to take, this is a great wine to take. This is what's nice to do. Or if you're cooking something yourself and you go, what am I going to have with it? Everybody says nothing goes with artichokes, nothing goes, right? Like Brussels sprouts are hard to pair with, or those type of things. you got to play with it. You know, I'm sorry, you throw enough pancetta and Brussels sprouts and some blue cheese, this wine's great. It goes with it really easy. So, you know, it just depends on how you flavor those wines and how you do that. As the course of this these virtual tastings go on, we'll talk a little bit more about the red wine. Tonight, we kind of really talked a lot about white wine making with the Chardonnay. We'll talk more and more about red wine making as the course goes on, because I kind of just touched on it, and there's a lot more going on with the red wine making programs. Because next week we're doing Brutocao Sauvignon Blanc, which is a whole other animal again, and I think we're doing Primitivo, so that'll give us a chance to really talk a little bit more about the Primitivo, this block up here behind me, and our red wine thing. So everybody's laughing at me. I guess, do we have any questions that we need to answer?
So right now we can open it up and wait for some to come in. Everyone just enjoy drinking what you got in your glass. And
so I think we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about tonight. Again, look for the big sale that's coming up. I'll give you one hint. We haven't had Cab on sale, Brutocao Cabernet on sale, since I don't know when, and it's going to be on sale. So you're going to want to look for that. And the reason why it hasn't been on sale is because we're always out of it, because it's always scoring 90+ points, and we can't keep it on the shelf. But we are opening this up to everybody, and we're opening up the Cab even to a sale, even a lot of reserve wines. The Coro will not be one of those wines. We'll be talking about Coro one of these days also to do that. Don't forget, if you want some more of these wines, to order them online to get some more of these 6-packs. Since it looks like we're going to be going a little bit longer, we might extend the 6-pack out a little bit more. I'll pick some more wines. What we're going to do next, we might throw those in so you know what they are. But we'll be talking about that. We'll definitely get that out to you. Again, we're here as long as you need us to be. If you have any more questions,
we got a few coming in. So
all right.
So someone's asking about the Coro sign behind you. It's a little cut off. It says first appellation control blend in the United States. So
Coro Mendocino is a consortium, like a Chateauneuf de Pape is a consortium. Chianti Classico with the Black Rooster, that's considered a consortium, which means there's bylaws on how you make the wine and what you can put into the wine. So Coro is the first one in the United States that we did that here in Mendocino County. It's a Zin-based wine, so that's what that means. That's what that's all about. Brutocao is one of the founding Coro wineries. Back in the year 2000. Yeah, so that's how long this has been going on, and that's why we proudly display this behind us. And you can't see it, but it's actually the tablecloth in front of us. But we're really proud of Zinfandel being our heritage grape, and that's what the whole idea is about all that. So that's what's going on. Thank you, stagehand Karen. Look at that. All right, so
we got another question. So maybe talk a little bit about bottle shapes, different bottle styles, and why maybe white has a different style, or is it for another reason?
Okay, so basically what you have here is this is considered a claret, and this is a Burgundy bottle. A claret is a Bordeaux wine, and Burgundy, of course, a Burgundian wine. So Chardonnay and Pinots are traditionally is a Burgundy wine because they don't need to lay down as long, and they drink a little bit sooner. That's why the bottle is shaped this way. With the punt, usually a shorter punt in the bottom, because they usually don't have as much sediment. Excuse me. And the other reason why, it stacks easier, and the barrels are actually shorter and squattier. You can't see the barrels that are next to me here, but you can see the barrel. This barrel back here. This is actually Burgundian, or not Burgundian. That's actually a Bordeaux style barrel. So it's because of ease of use. Now clarets, because usually they're talking, Cabs, Merlots, that type of thing. You're talking about wines that lay down longer. So they're made to where they can lay down and stack for a longer period of time. And you can get more bottles in a smaller space that way. So that's the main reason. The other thing is that if you look at, this is what's called antique green. The color of the glass is also just as important. That's why you'll see a lot of Alsatian wines used to come in a brown antique, because they are very susceptible to sunlight. So they put them in a brown bottle. You'll see our set, like the Sauvignon Blancs, because it's a sales point. They're in what's called a flint. That's a flint claret. because they're a Bordeaux style wine. That's so you could just see the wine, so people knew the difference. I mean, it's almost that simple. So it's a matter of function over the years that we've kept the style of it. A sparkling wine bottle or champagne bottle is made it is because it can withstand pressure better than these style bottles. So that's the reason why. And so that's why you have so many different style of bottles. And anymore, it's not as important as it used to be, but it's more traditional, because you see all kinds of different, you see blue glass, whatever, there's also what's called deadly green, which is a lot lighter, which our Chardonnay Pinot used to be in, or Chardonnay especially was that deadly green. It's a lighter green style, but we've gone to the antique green, which helps protect it from sunlight. So that's why we do that.
Okay, and another question, how long does your blending process take to come up with the final percentages in the Quadriga, for example?
About 18 months is the short answer. It starts in the vineyard, it really does. It really starts with me tasting the grapes out there and kind of segregating out what I think is going to be the Brutocao wine, what yeast I want to do, what treatment I want to do. It starts there, it really does. As far as the Quadriga, I started the 2018 Quadriga is what we're working on right now. It started in basically December and January this year, when we went through and tasted every new barrel of every lot of the Italians and a couple of the neutral barrels to give us an idea what they taste like, and start segregating out which wines we thought were, which barrels we liked and flavor profiles. So what that does is then that gives me an idea on paper of how I want to pump them out and blend them together. And that's actually what we did today. We got them pumped out by, I just taste them, we pumped them out, kept them separated. I will go in tomorrow. I will taste each of the individual tanks just for the Sangiovese. I have 5 tanks of Sangiovese to go taste tomorrow to make the Sangiovese blend out. I pretty much have it in my mind. I know which ones I want, but I'm still going to taste all of them anyway, just to make sure and start playing with that blend. So that'll be this week's project. I'll get that finished up. I started the Primitivo last week. I'm going to finalize that again tomorrow also, so I'll be playing with that. So probably, I would say I'm about 2 weeks to a week out for finalizing Quadriga, because I got to finalize all the components first. And then it's probably another week after that, I guess, until it's kind of really set, until I taste it again, just to make sure. Meanwhile, I'll be also working on Merlot, Cabernet, Zinfandel, Coro, what else we got going on right now? So it's like, so I'm doing all the reds at the same time, kind of. It's just like every day there's just a focus on one thing. Then it's this, okay, I'll go out to the cellar crew, do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll work on the other wine and come back and say, I want X, Y, and Z done to this, so I can go back to wine A again. So yeah,
So this isn't your first glass today?
No, no. I've been going since 5 o'clock this morning, so yeah.
Quick question on kind of what you were talking about. With the Quadriga, you said you make the components as standalone individual Brutocao wines, and then you blend to get the Quadriga. How about on your other blends like Torrent or the Coro? Are you doing it in the same way, or is that more of a separate blend completely?
Coro's a little bit more barrel selective. We actually this year made a Zin blend that's actually going to be the Brutocao Zin, and then we're going to add to that to make the Coro. So it's a little bit different for us this year. Torrent is, we make the best Merlot we can make, pretty much, and then we'll look at, when I'm blending the Cab, I kind of look at, see if there's a component of the Cabernet I want to keep separate for Torrent, but I've always found that our Cab is so good and blends so well that we just make our Brutocao Cabernet. And that's pretty much what we add to the Torrent. Originally, we had one section of vineyard that we're kind of holding back for the Torrent. But it's more about just the Brutocao Cab itself, because it has the whole Brutocao Cab program. When we talk about Cab later on, also has all the same components. It's all hillside, it's all rocky soils, it's all well drained going to the creek. So the Syrah is made to be a blender, period. So when we add the Syrah to it, what's going to be fun about Torrent, in about 4 more years, you're going to see some Cab Franc and some Malbec coming in. So that's actually going to be a true blended wine. That's what I'm kind of really excited to see those once those grapes start kicking in, get a little more mature. You'll see those those varietals also work into Torrent.
Okay, what does naturally fermented wine mean, and do any of your wines fit the bill?
No. All right, so naturally fermented wines, actually, I shouldn't say that. We have played with natural fermented wines in our Pinot Noir program from Anderson Valley. Um, so what it means when a wine's naturally fermented is it means we do not add any yeast to it. It just takes off on its own. It's its own, whatever yeast come from the vineyard, supposedly. Since we use our commercialized yeast in our winery for so many years, it's kind of hard to say that it's actually the yeast from the vineyard. But what it does is when you ferment that way, no matter where the yeast come from, it's a lot slower. So it takes a lot longer for it to ramp up and to get fermenting. So it's a little slower fermentation. So you get a different style of wine. Usually you can get some components and terroir out of the vineyard that you normally wouldn't get. Now I match the yeast that I use to get the terroir that I want. We use a lot of different yeast. I probably order about 30 different yeast strains that I use. So.
And Haas, I don't know if you can see, but a little shout out to Luke out in Kansas. He's watching.
Lukey boy. All right, Ed Hesta has been a huge Brutocao supporter for a lot of years. Luke, thank you very much.
All right. And so does the Nebbiolo grape do well in our area?
No. Next. No, just kidding. You know, there's something about Nebbiolos, the Italian Pinot Noir, and you got to sing to it every night. I don't know what it is. People have tried it. I have not seen it do well. Doesn't mean it can't be done. Doesn't mean it's not being done. Which means that there will be 50 people correcting me right now that I said that. But yeah, it's just for our area, you probably could find someplace in Mendocino County to grow it, but it's, you know, I don't know how good it would sell.
Okay, out of all the wines you make, what's your go-to white and what's your go-to red?
Whatever you buy. Right now, probably, well, we tasted them last week. I'll be honest with you. That Zen, the 14 Zen, and the Bliss Sauvignon Blanc are two of my favorites. You know, we drink a lot of rosé at our house. I got to tell you that right now. So there's a lot of that going down. And Sangiovese, our Brutocao Sangiovese, which is in the Italian series label. So.
Have the fires in the last couple of years affected our grapes? And they're remembering the 08 vintage, where that really did affect the end product. So maybe speak to the fires recently.
08 was a totally different year. It was a totally different fire. It was everywhere. The recent fires have not affected us at all. We look for smoke taint. We worry about smoke taint. So you're always looking for it. We've learned a lot since 2008, 2009, as wine growers and winemakers throughout California to deal with smoke taint. Unfortunately, it's been at the expense of our Australian brethren who have dealt with it for a lot longer than we have, and who've really got hosed this year pretty hard by it, but in certain areas. But yeah, no, we haven't. 08 was the only year that really affected us. We haven't been affected since then. And, you know, if you know what you're looking for, and you know, and we deal with it, but we haven't seen it since then.
On the Chardonnay, when you barrel back the reserve, how much longer? What's the extension on that?
About 8 months. So it sits in a barrel for another 8 months. We actually leave it on some lees too, and then sits in there. And then we're getting, in fact, so we're just getting ready to bottle the 2018 in about 2 weeks.
How does like a rainier season affect our wines? And that's kind of a complex question because when the rain hits and
yeah, well, it's just let's talk about cold. Let's talk about cold and wet. When it's cold and wet, you have higher pressure for mold and mildew, so you have that aspect you have to look at. Also, we need what's called degree days. So we look at how many days or how many hours of 80-degree weather we have for grapes to ripen. And there's kind of a formula by varietal, how many you need to get to that point. So when you have rain and cold, you slow that ripening process down. Our biggest problem with rain or cold is usually during bloom, when the grapes are blooming. That's when we don't want any rain because that's when we get shattered. When that happens, you lose a lot of the crop. You get uneven berries, uneven size berries. to where in the same bunch you might have what you call chicks and hens. So you have little BB-sized berries that are pollinated, and then you have these great big berries that are pollinated. So you have like two totally different flavor profiles you're trying to make wine. So that's what our biggest worry is usually during bloom, and then for mildew, if you don't have a good mildew program, then that also becomes an issue. But yeah, usually it's the coldness delaying out our harvest. So like I was talking about 16, we were done by the middle of October. That's because it was warm and dry the whole time, so everything ripened so fast, but almost too fast. So where 18 was a little bit better, it was kind of a little bit more, it was lengthened out. We finished like in November, like we usually do the first week of November or last week of October, because we kind of had a little bit more normal growing season.
Okay, I've got a question here. Who is your favorite distributor?
Why, Luke, how are you doing today? That who sells the most.
And are there any grapes that you wish that you grew, or that we grow?
That's a good question. It's not Nebbiolo, and it's not Pinot Grigio. I can tell you that right now. No, I think it's maybe the only thing I would think about, and I really don't want to say this because I know Stephen Brutocao is listening right now, is maybe something, maybe another Italian white wine, but just to play with a little bit, just because I've never done it before. But I'll be honest with you, with all the grapes that we grow and all the different blocks that we have, there's plenty to play with and a lot of fun. So
how about Carmenere?
No.
Lenny says we don't need to grow any more
I know,
varietals.
and I agree with Lenny. We don't need any more varietals.
I'm not sure that everyone knows some of the more some of the varietals that we grow that we use as blenders. That, like you mentioned, the Malbec and the Cab Franc, which are newer plantings.
Yeah, so Syrah's kind of we do make a little Syrah, but Syrah's pretty much a blender for us. Kerrigan and Petite Syrah are both blenders for us that we use. We don't make an individual one. I think those are the only ones we don't make an individual wine out of. And Dolcetto. We don't make an individual Dolcetto anymore. We only use it for Quadriga and our Rosé. So that's the only place.
Well, we're going to get the question. If you had a standout year with enough to make it, would you do a standalone Dolcetto,
No.
maybe for the wine club?
No.
I'm guessing Steven's going to type back.
I know. Steven's going to say, yeah, well, it's possible. It's possible.
You never know.
The reason why is because we do have so many varietals and we do have so many different wines that we could make a lot of different other wines that we don't do. It's like Merlot. And I'll be honest with you, I think Merlot is one of the best grapes that we grow. It's one of my favorite blocks, but we make a torrent. We don't make a standalone Merlot. I'd make a standalone Merlot before I make a standalone Dolcetto. How's that for an answer?
It's good. We have a question about corks, and I thought maybe next week when you talk about the glasses, maybe that's a good topic to add in too, because that's a good.
Maybe next week we'll get it in one of these weeks. We'll
Yeah.
talk about corks and closures and that type of thing. But yeah, we'll keep.
And how about could you speak to like organic, maybe in terms of like organic grape growing versus organic winemaking and everything surrounding that?
Well, basically, when you do, we try to stay as organic as possible, and we're trying to stay sustainable. And what you do when you're doing that, you're trying to build healthy soils and healthy vines. So if you have healthy soils and healthy vines, you're going to have great grapes to use. And by using those principles, that's how we grow the grapes we do to make the wines we do. So being a state, that's the big thing about organic. It's not using chemical fertilizers. It's using it's a slower method of getting to an endpoint. So basically, organics are using a lot more compost, fish emulsions, that type of thing to build the soils up, which takes a little bit longer. This year, I don't know, Lenny could speak to this. I forget, we did 400 or 600 tons of compost this year on our vineyards. I think Lenny will pop in here in a minute. But that's what we're doing, and we're not certified organic. But we did that on purpose because it helps build better soils in the long run. So we do a lot of these things. We just don't go through all the certifications to get there. But that's what organic is really about. It's about farming a little bit cleaner. It's kind of like, it's like you're not eating You're not eating a baked potato with a ton of butter on it. You're going for the sweet potato, with a little salt and pepper, that type of thing.
What about organic winemaking?
Organic winemaking, actually, the funny part is I use a lot of organic winemaking products. All my yeast are organic. Almost all my nutritional ads that I make to the juices are all organic. I actually use them because I think they're a better product, make a better wine. So when you do that, you're limited to, you can't use a lot of these different chemicals that a lot of larger, bigger, bulkier wineries like to use, Gallo. But and we try not to do that. We try to stay as clean as possible. I try to use natural products unless it's an absolute necessary thing that I cannot not do. But I feel if I have to go to a product like that, I failed as a winemaker somehow earlier in the production, that I should have caught it or done something different. So I use that as a learning experience to make sure it doesn't happen. I'm very honest about what we put in our wines and how we make our wines, because I want people to know that. And if they, most of our wines are vegan, except for our whites, because we use isinglass, which has, so basically it's powderized fish bladder. So people, if you're vegan, you're not going to drink our whites, which is fine with that. If there are vegan wines out there and there are organic wines out there, you can find.
And just to note, nutritional ads are not nutrition for you, they're for the yeast.
That's correct. It's vitamins for the yeast.
How long have you been making wine?
Been drinking it for a long time. So basically I've been a winemaker here since 2009, and I was 20 years before that at Ferrari Carano running all their cellars, not the winemaker, but basically running the cellars for them, doing all that stuff. So technically as a winemaker forever.
Steven says Baskin Robbins did 31 flavors. Why are we stopping at 20?
Because you don't have that much money.
Let's see. Merlot is a favorite for a lot of our wine club members. They remember that was a big varietal for us. And you're being complimented. They love what you've done ever since.
We are talking about maybe making a bit of Brutocao Merlot through the tasting room only type of a thing. So you may see that. We're not sure yet. We're still playing with it. I'm going to see what the wines look like here probably next month.
You have another compliment. Your shirt matches the pictures very nicely behind you.
Oh, wait till you see my green one, baby.
Someone's asking about like our acreage, so maybe our fallow land versus planted.
Well, right now we got about 250 acres under vine. We got about 100 acres fallow. We rotated through. Basically most of our fallow, a lot of the fallow is some 50 acres of Chardonnay that we pulled out. Lenny's going to correct me, but we had some Chardonnay vines that had been planted in the 70s, and they were just they were done. So we pulled all those out, but we replanted some other Chardonnay to replace that. That's that block 13 I'm talking about, to do that. So we're still looking at what we're going to replant in these fallow areas. Right now we have plenty of grapes for what we need, and we'll see what we're going to expand on. We do have some older vineyards that do need to be replaced. So that's what we're looking at, is when we need to replace those vineyards, that's what we'll swap over that fallow land for.
Right. It looks like we're kind of caught up on any questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define an older vineyard? So I think a lot of people have the question, especially with old vine Zins and things like that.
Well, like old vine Zin, I think they're saying what they're 45 to 50 years old as an old vine Zin. I can't remember.
There's no legal.
Yeah, there's no real legal definition, but people argue about that all the time. I look at an older vineyard as that when I say something's an older vineyard, it's a vineyard that's on its decline. It's not producing like it used to produce. It's becoming a little bit more problematic, taking a little bit more care as far as farming and in the winery to make a good product. That's an older vineyard to me. Now, there could be a vineyard that's old, that it's not an issue, and that's not going to be replaced. So, if it's still producing great fruit and it's not a lot of work, and for us in a winery, it has great flavors, yeah, we'll keep going. That's like with our old wines in that we had. you know, it kept going, it kept producing until it finally couldn't produce the quality it needed to anymore. That's when we took it
I think this might be one of the last questions. What's your favorite beer?
out. Free. Free beer is my favorite.
All right.
All right, everybody. It looks like we're pretty much wrapped up here tonight. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the wines. We'll see you next Thursday. We're going to be doing Primitivo and Sauvignon Blanc. We'll talk about the glassware a little bit more and get on that aspect. If you have any other comments, bitches, moans, complaints, send them to Kevin. He can handle
that's
all that.
Chris.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's Chris. No, seriously, let us know if there's something you want to see, a certain wine you want to do. I'm going to start making up the list of the next set of wines we're going to do for the next 3 weeks after this is over, and we'll let you know that probably next week. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Enjoy your evening. Stay safe, please. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.